Good evening, I'm Shehab Khan. Here are your headlines in London. A new report looking at maternal health services throughout the pandemic has described care in the capital as a postcode lottery. Today, Sadiq Khan agreed that lessons needed to be learned. Carolyn Sim reports.
While the world was dealing with the pandemic, some women were giving birth alone. Some were losing babies alone. And a new report has found the care they received across London was like a postcode lottery.
Yeah.
Mia Roberts Mukasa had her son Oscar by emergency C-section in October 2021. At that time, COVID restrictions in communities had been relaxed. But in hospital, after her tiny son was rushed away to be incubated, Mia was left alone for 8 hours.
It was scary, it was mixed emotions, and it was lonely. The fact that I had been promised that I would have been able to have my mum with me and then I wasn't, that was an additional burden.
You were almost treated in a kind of inhumane way.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like, I feel like the trusts were trying to be seen to be being tough on COVID, you know, implement tough rules, but weren't actually thinking of the impact that it was having on families.
The London Assembly Health Committee asked those who used maternity services during COVID about their experiences and found there were disparities in the levels of care provided between different NHS trusts. Staffing levels were inadequate in many units. The pandemic had a negative impact on the mental health of women and their partners, and staff from minority ethnic groups were more likely to face discrimination. The report's authors say lessons need to be learned from the pandemic about how to improve maternity care in London, and they want the Mayor to help.
The Mayor can, at the very least, use his convening powers. He has the London Health Board and get NHS services and maternity services across London together to make sure that they are meeting the standards that have been set by NHS guidelines.
Well, how are you?
The problem for the NHS, the Mayor told us today, is funding.
I know from conversations I've had in the past with them is they're working incredibly hard with limited resources. Their staff are stretched, and that's why I'm sure there'll be allies in lobbying the government for more resources. The reality is it's very difficult to provide the level of service that our city deserves with the level of cuts we've had over the last 13 years.
That one, okay, we can get that one down.
The NHS in London says improving maternity services is a priority and that work is underway to tackle inequalities in care. But many people like Mia were so traumatised by their experience, their trust in the service has been broken. Carolyn Sim, ITV News.
2 serving Metropolitan Police officers have been sacked after sharing offensive messages in a WhatsApp group. 6 officers are also barred from serving again after being found guilty of sending racist, homophobic and transphobic messages. The Met has apologised to Katie Price and her son Harvey, who was the butt of some of the jokes. Helen Keenan reports.
2 police officers sacked from the Met for swapping racist jokes in a WhatsApp group.
The messages were horrendous, they have no place in policing and they have been dealt with and dismissed.
6 others were also involved. They had already resigned. Today, the hearing into their behaviour found they too would have been dismissed if they had still been serving. And all of the officers told they will never be allowed to serve in a police force in this country again.
We will do everything we possibly can to rebuild that, to demonstrate that we're very serious about rooting out those people that shouldn't be here so that everybody can have complete trust that officers and staff in the Met will give them the best service that they expect.
Along with sexist comments about a female colleague and joking about Nazi concentration camps, they also targeted Katie Price's son Harvey in a series of racist images and comments.
Does it make Harvey happy that the police officers have got told off today?
No.
For being horrible to Harvey?
Yeah.
The Met have issued an apology to her, but speaking to ITV yesterday, she called for sanctions to be strengthened so officers posting this kind of content could be imprisoned.
Until there's an example in place to know that some kind of punishment can happen, it's just going to keep carrying on. And I think now something needs to be shown that if something does happen, you can actually be punished for it.
It's less than a month since the Casey report was released, a damning examination into the Met. The result of today's hearing continues to raise questions around police culture.
When you've got officers that sit in WhatsApp groups in a comfortable position where they're with their mates and they think it's okay to have conversations and say whatever it is that they want to do because nobody else will know about it. The problem is those behaviours are exactly the same behaviours that they will then go and display out to members of the public to marginalise. And what has happened is allowed an organisation to fester and basically it is actually embedded into the culture as if it's the norm.
The result of today's hearing highlights the mountain the Commissioner will have to climb to rebuild public trust. Helen Keenan, ITV News.
A 17-year-old is fighting for his life in hospital after being shot in the head in Tottenham in the early hours of yesterday morning. It comes after a number of teenage stabbings this month, including the killing of Chima Osuji outside a school in Chingford last week. A 16-year-old boy has been charged with his murder. A British man has pleaded guilty to travelling to Syria to join the so-called Islamic State 9 years ago. Shehab Suleiman from High Wycombe was 19 when he disappeared during a family holiday to Turkey in 2014. Now, a look inside the £4 billion super sewer that will help protect the Thames from pollution. It's a 15-mile-long tunnel designed to ease pressure on the capital's creaking waste system. At more than 150 years old, it struggles with the number of people now living here, regularly sending excess waste into our waterways. Rags Martel reports.
We're in Battersea and going underground. But first, oh my God, we have to go up. Thames Tideway have invited us to look at London's new super sewer.
So this is the only way to actually get into the tunnel?
At the moment, yes. Coming down, looking good now.
Slowly, we are taken down.
All the way.
The winch drops us 55 metres.
About 10 metres to go now.
It takes 5 minutes, but at last, we touch down. And once we're here, the best way to see the new super sewer is to ride it by bicycle.
Wow.
6 years in the making, the tunnel is now 15 miles long, stretching from Ealing in the west all the way to Abbey Mills near Stratford in the east.
How much is this super sewer needed in London?
This super sewer is really needed for us in London because the current sewage system is from the 19th century, which was meant to capture water for approximately 4 million people. At this very moment, I think there is about 8 million people living in London.
When the old Victorian sewers, designed by Sir Joseph Bazalgette, get overloaded, they can't cope and human waste overspills into the Thames. But with the new super sewer, excess waste will instead go to the overspill and then drop down to be then washed away.
So with this super sewer, we're trying to capture all that overflow water and create a better clean environment for the River Thames.
So not only will this manage London sewer better, but it will also make a cleaner Thames.
Exactly. We're looking into, in the future, have a cleaner environment for the river and have a proper ecosystem in it.
And this super sewer is very wide, more than 7 metres in width, enough to fit 3 London buses facing you side by side. We often see those pictures of the fatbergs, as they're called, blocking up sewers. How is this going to be different?
Well, we've got an inclination in the tunnel of 1 to 789, which is about 0.13% of inclination towards that way to the east. So that is going to help us getting rid of all those chunks of material.
Our cycle over, we left the workers to it. The super sewer is due to open its waters in 2025. Rags Martel, ITV News, Battersea.
Now, let's take a look at the weather with Philippa Drew.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
Good evening. It certainly has been a rather cloudy and damp end to the working week. Thankfully, things are looking a lot more promising as we head through the next few days. More in the way of dry weather on the way, the wind's easing down for a time, and in the best of any sunshine, it should actually feel pretty warm out there. but not so at the moment. A lot of cloud on the scene, outbreaks of rain quite persistent and locally heavy for a time this evening. However, as the night wears on, the rain will start to slowly nudge its way eastwards, tending to ease off a little bit. And of course, with the cloudy skies and the rain, it will be a frost-free night all round. Tomorrow morning then, a cloudy start, rain on the scene for some of us first thing, but conditions will quickly start to improve. The rain will peter out fairly early on, the sunshine will start to break through, and those temperatures will begin to rise. Now, as those temperatures go up the scale, we will see a few showers breaking out. They should be fairly few and far between, but if you catch one, it could still be on the heavy and perhaps thundery side. Nevertheless, with much lighter winds than we've had today and temperatures a little bit higher in the best of that sunshine, it will feel fairly pleasant, highs of 14 or 15, and it sets the tone for the next few days to come.
Valent sponsors ITV London Weekend Weather.
That's all from the London team. We'll be back tomorrow at 6:20. Until then, goodbye.